Dual Blades, the bayest of blades. Between having the highest potential melee DPS in the game, the best mobility in the game, and the unique ability to literally never stop hitting a monster even when dodging attacks, this weapon is truly a powerhouse in the right hands. Limited only by its very short reach, stamina management, and understanding of animation commitment windows, this weapon is the perfect example of a low skill floor weapon with an extremely high skill ceiling. Very easy to pick up for any new player, but when truly mastered is one of the few melee weapons that can rival the heavy bowgun and bowmaster races for TA speedrun clear times. And by mastered, we basically mean being Natsume. Also, you get to do really cool shit like this. But how do you maximize the damage on your dual blades? Well, I'm JinJinx.
And I'm Tuna. And we're
the Monster Hunter Math Guys. And this is Monster Hunter Meta Dual Blade Kjarr weapon builds.
In this video, we'll be covering the elemental Kjarr sets. Each element will provide the highest damage possible. We know not everyone has the Kjarr weapons yet, so we'll be covering the non-Kjarr weapons in another video.
There is a case where the non-Kjarr weapon actually out DPSs the Kjarr option, but we will discuss the pros and cons of each when we get to that. And I do want to start off with a quick disclaimer, as I always do in these videos. All the builds, analyses, breakdown, and everything we do on the channel are not meant to tell you how to play. These are the builds for max deeps, but that is not the only way to play, and we are not suggesting that. The purpose of what we do is to educate and inform, is to give you the factual information on the relative strengths of different builds and playstyles so that you can make informed decisions. I have personally been using Evade window on my builds against Archetype and Gigante recently. I simply am physically incapable of focusing long enough to continually avoid his attacks for all 10 plus minutes. So play how you like and enjoy yourself, it is a video game after all.
Excluding the stupidly overtuned Ice Charge Blade, dual blades benefited the most from the release of Kjarr weapons. Crit element and therefore the Wrath armor pieces were mandatory on dual blades since they're an elemental focus weapon. But fitting that with 100% affinity and Master's Touch for nearly infinite white sharpness was nearly impossible with the inefficient Wrath pieces.
Not to mention you would struggle to fit in crit boost, and dual blade still deals around 80 to 85% raw damage, so EFR does matter.
Bow and Sword and Shield also benefited, but we'll go more into that topic on their respective videos.
Alright, let's get to the actual builds. Let's start with the Dragon build. The Kjarr Dagger's Dragon. With peak performance active, this set hits 497.11 EFR and 41.01 EFE. For your Dragon Weak monsters like the Rathalos family and Behemoth, this is the hardest hitting DP set you can get. Health Augment is of course mandatory as this is a peak build. Master's Touch and 100% affinity means you have infinite sharpness as long as you're hitting weak points.
And even if you miss weak points, it has 20 units of white sharpness, which on dual blades translates to 60 hits. All dual blades have innate razor sharp built into the weapon class that makes them only lose sharpness every third hit. And because Wex makes up 50% of the affinity on this set, it means you have to hit non-weak points 120 times on average before you hit blue sharpness, at which point the monster should be dead. Compared to the previous best Dragon dual blades, the Joe dual blades. This build hits harder so long as peak is active. If you don't have the Kjarr Dragon dual blades yet, we'll be covering the Joe dual blades in the next video. Next we have the Thunder build. The Kjarr Dagger's Spark build probably looks pretty familiar because it's nearly identical to the Dragon set. The main difference is that the Spark doesn't require handicrafts as it has natural white. This means that you can fit in some more attack boost instead of that handicraft. Similar to the Dragon build, this is a peak build, so health augment is mandatory.
This build is particularly interesting because it's actually the first Thunder Dual Blades build to be the best matchup for Kushala Daora and Legiana. Both of these have relatively low Thunder hit zone values despite Thunder being their biggest elemental weakness. They both also happen to have very high poison weaknesses. This actually made Poison DBs the best matchup for them, assuming you aren't a DPS uptime machine like Natsume. However, the Spark has enough damage that Poison DBs are officially RIP. And no, this is not an ATKT counter build, there's no Popbreaker or Bombardier in the set. Check out our ATKT meta builds videos for those, link in the top right.
Next up we have the Fire dual blades, the Kjarr Dagger's Rage. There are actually two sets for this. Let's cover the highest DPS set first. This peak build deals the most DPS a Fire dual blades build can. As always, we recommend health augment because it's peak. While this set only hits 90% affinity, it has 90 units of blue sharpness. Due to the innate razor sharp, this is 270 hits of blue sharpness. With only a 10% chance to trigger a sharpness loss, that's 2,700 hits on average until you hit green sharpness. Good luck. Unfortunately, the Rage dual blades can't hit white sharpness, but its base stats are so high it really doesn't need it. 476.54 EFR and 37.72 EFE, those are impressive numbers despite not hitting white. One thing we want to say though, there is a distinct issue with this Peak set, and that's Val Hazak. Peak is completely unrealistic to keep up against Val Hazak due to his effluvial aura, but fire is the best element to use against him. So what do?
So for Val Hazak, you want to run this set that uses Agitator instead. Also, if you are just not comfortable running Peak Performance, this is your go-to set. Health Augment is still recommended because of the damage over time chipping away at your health, especially Arc-Tempered Val Hazak. The 3-layered damage over time you can suffer during his fight really hurt. Hell, even bow speedruns run Health Augment against him. With Agitator active, it hits 470.73 EFR and 38.63 EFE. This is slightly lower than the Peak build in terms of EFR, and Agitator uptime is also questionable outside of some matchups. It is one of those skills that if you kill a monster very fast, it has a very high uptime. Generally, the monster will enrage at the start of the fight and die before the enrage wears off. Vice versa, the longer the fight goes on, the less Agitator uptime you have. But frankly, there isn't much better to use. You could use an attack boost charm instead if you'd like, but the 2 Agitator does only give you 1 less true roar while giving you 9% more affinity while active. So really up to you. The Agitator build is higher DPS assuming you can get a high uptime on it. Now technically, the old KT Ice and Water dual blades do actually slightly out damage the Kjarr options, at least in matchups with low raw hit zone values as well as high elemental hit zone values. However, those builds could only fit into handicrafts, so they only had 10 units of white sharpness. Combined with the fact that they have lower overall affinity in the builds, these had a lot less effective sharpness, to the point where you cannot even run a health augment on those old KT dual blades builds because you would not have enough affinity. Without affinity augment, they hit 80% affinity, which frankly isn't enough with 10 units of white sharpness and Master's Touch to kill a monster unless you are extremely clean. If you've seen our longsword meta video, it's the difference between the meta build and the comfier meta build. One has twice the sharpness in exchange for a little bit less damage, like 2% less damage, which is totally worth it if you're not going to hit blue sharpness due to the extra handicraft. And yes, we will be covering those old KT dual blades builds in case you don't have the Kjarr ones in the next video. But let's take a look at the Ice and Water Kjarr sets.
The set is the same for both of these. The stats are identical, except the Kjarr Dagger's Ice has 5% more affinity. Just switch out the elemental attack decos. Similar to all previous sets, this is a Peak set, so health augment, mandatory. These will be your best DPS options against anything primarily weak to water or ice damage. However, there are 2 glaring exceptions to this, Teostra and Lunastra. Teostra is weakest to water and Lunastra to ice, but practically speaking, both have mechanics that make running Peak builds almost impossible.
For Teostra, you want to use this water build instead. It essentially trades the Peak and a level of Handicraft for an extra level of attack boost, 2 levels of Agitator, and a crit eye. You don't really need more than 10 units of white sharpness against Teostra because he has a very big head that you'll be hitting the entire time in order to get trips on him. And if you've ever fought Teostra with dual blades, being right up in his face is actually the safest place to be. Half of his attacks simply miss you when you're close enough to him. Agitator is a very good matchup for Teostra because he pretty much enrages immediately upon engaging, and due to his head tripping mechanics, he is very easy to kill before the enrage ends. With the Agitator active, you have well over 100% affinity, and his head is really big, so you don't really have to worry about hitting blue sharpness.
For Luna, you'll want to run this ice set instead. This set trades out a level of Agitator and attack boost for Handicraft 4. This is important because it gives you 30 units of white sharpness, 90 hits after the innate Razor Sharp. Her only weak points are her tail and her wings. Both of these are relatively inaccessible as dual blades until you trip her. This means that your play cycle for Luna with dual blades is hit the legs until she falls over, Demon Dance on the wings, repeat till dead. With Agitator active, you hit 53% affinity on her legs. On average, this gives you 191 hits before you hit blue. This is enough white sharpness to not need to sharpen during the fight, either killing her outright or sharpening when she transitions to a new area.
Now, we still run Weakness Exploit on this build because the majority of your damage comes from the Demon Dance on her wings during each trip. We want these to hit her as hard as possible. Alternatively, you can run a Protective Polish deco instead of the Handicraft deco. This is the equivalent of losing 30 hits of white on your dual blades, which when you account for the 53% affinity on average, this is 64 hits on the legs. Basically, if you could land more than 64 hits on the legs in the 1 minute of Protective Polish, Polish is more worth running. But whether you can fit in 64 hits on her legs while she's attacking you during a minute is very player skill dependent. Alright guys, that about does it. We do have another video on the way talking about the next best meta dual blades options for those of you who don't have the Kjarr DBs yet. And of course, if you're looking to farm those juicy Kjarr weapons, be sure to check out our ATKT guides to learn everything you need to know about farming her as fast as possible.
As always, thank you for watching. You know what to do if you liked the video. If you're looking for somebody to hunt with or just looking to hang out, check out our Discord server, the Mathalos Nest. You can follow us on Twitter, where we post updates to the channel and other things that interest us. You can also check me out on Twitch, where I stream Monster Hunter and other games almost every day. Shout out to Honey at Honey Hunter's World for providing the tools we use to make sets.
And if you'd like to help support us, be sure to check out our Patreon. And an especially big thank you to McPersona, Foray, Exponage, David Sternberg, XCLK07, Hiker, Milky Powder, Yoshi Cho, John Cohen, Wedmanticore, Lithoboli, Robin, Bram Orsel, Anti-Spartan, Chris Porth, Lightweights, Skylar Yang, Checkleman, Lupin, Mongus, Zimv, Billy Barthol, Reaper Time, Jamie, and every single one of you who supports us on Patreon. Thank you all so much for supporting us.
We currently have another poll going up for the next meta set, with the current winner being Gunlance. If you'd like to save me from making a Gunlance guide, please consider donating on Patreon and voting. If you made it this far, thank you again. We'll see you in the next one. Happy hunting, hunters.
Bye.